Good afternoon, and welcome to the final session of the Ceres 2021 conference, Raising the Stakes on Public Advocacy. It's wonderful to be with you all. I'm Ann Kelly. I'm Vice President of Government Relations for Ceres, and I have the distinct honor of introducing our special guest, Gina McCarthy. Gina is a brilliant environmental health and air quality expert, serving as the first White House National Climate Advisor under President Joe Biden. She served as the 13th Administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency from 2013 to 2017 under President Obama. In early 2020, Gina became President and CEO of the Natural Resources Defense Council. But soon thereafter, she answered the call to public service, and we are so grateful to her for doing so. In December 2020, President-elect Joe Biden announced that he would be nominating Gina as the first National Climate Advisor, where she will personally advise the president on climate matters, and she will lead the White House Office of Domestic Climate Policy. No one is more qualified to tackle the profound political, scientific, and economic challenges that climate change presents. Please join me in giving a warm Ceres welcome to our very good friend, longtime colleague, and climate champion, Gina McCarthy, who will first offer remarks and then join Mindy Luber for a final chat. Welcome to you, Gina.
Thank you, Ann. Well, first of all, Ann, thank you for the terrific introduction. And I'm really excited to be back with all of you at Ceres. I feel like you're my home away from home, so it's great to see how excited everybody is about this moment in time in which we find ourselves in. And I'm equally excited, even though I'm in a bat cave in the White House, not too far from the mess. But it's okay. The food's good, and it keeps me hopping. That's for sure. But I really am looking forward to spending a little bit of time talking to Mindy. I know that it's been a terrific conference, as they always are here. And I just wanted to sort of give a few remarks now before we get a chance to talk, just to give you sort of my sense of where we are right now and where we're heading. And obviously I can't give more details than I'm allowed to give, but I will tell you that I think that the name of this conference is a terrific and appropriate one, Transform Tomorrow Today, because today is what we actually have. And right now, I do feel like for the past year plus at this point, we have done nothing but hunker down and wonder what shoe is going to fall next. And so it is I think, a moment in time that we have right now when perhaps we can see that ray of hope again, and we can turn that into a real opportunity for us to do exactly what you're talking about today, is to stop being afraid and to start being bold again, to start treating this country like we can do things together. And I think if we do, we'll actually be able to achieve some remarkable success for moving forward. And so we have to focus on the issues and the opportunities we have at hand. And I think there are many. So I do plan to push you. I plan to push you to make sure that you're actually doing what this plenary session says, that you're raising the stakes in your policy advocacy, because you have been attending these conferences, many of you, for a long time, as have I, and we have to be all in now. Because the challenge isn't where we are in 2050. The challenge is recognizing where we need to be in 2050 and acting on that today. So we start showing the rest of the world that the United States is not just back in terms of Paris, but we are going to be back in terms of our leadership economically, that we are going to be and always be the strongest nation on the face of the earth. And we are going to turn this pandemic into an opportunity for us to once again see the future that we can create together. So I'm hugely excited about the opportunities right now, because I do think that we're at an inflection point. We are at a moment in time that I don't think I ever expected to be at. but because it's frankly like no other. It's moving from a point in, let me turn Dickens on his head a little bit. It's moving from the worst of times to the best of times. And that is actually what we have to think about delivering. And I know that that's the reason why I'm actually in the White House today, because there was a moment in time during the campaigning for the presidency when I don't think any of us knew who the actual nominee was going to be. But then, I think then campaigner for President Biden, he actually distinguished himself in a couple of ways that I found just irresistible. It was his honesty, I think, in his, acknowledgement that we had real challenges. And he talked about, in essence, 4 challenges. And forgive me, but I want to go through these because they mattered to me about how I'm thinking about the work I'm doing now. And they were the reason why I came back to do this work. And it was because he really stood up, and he called COVID-19 the most significant health challenge that we were facing, and one that science would get us out of if we paid attention to it. And lo and behold, he has delivered on the science on the pandemic, and he's done remarkable things to actually move our vaccinations forward and give us an opportunity to feel hopeful again. But at that point in time also, I think it was a moment in COVID-19 when we stopped arguing about whether climate change was real. Because there are a lot of people that said it wasn't, because the world isn't going to get that difficult, life isn't going to change like this. Well, guess what? It did. And people began to understand the fragility of our lives in the world we live in, because they were impacted greatly by some virus and disease that they never thought about before. And it was incredibly important, and I think an epiphany for people, that it opened them up to realize that life is fragile and things can change. And all of a sudden, we weren't arguing about whether climate change was real. We were talking about how to get out of the pandemic using science, and how to recognize that the climate science is real, and we have to be bold and take care of that. And there was also a racial reckoning, which was his second big crisis that he mentioned. And isn't it about time? Isn't it time when we all have to recognize that there's been systemic disinvestment in certain communities, those same communities that we talk about as environmental justice communities, who are when they're really just focused on pollution causing health damage for populations that always seem to be Black and brown, indigenous populations, the poor. Those are the communities most at risk, and those are the communities in the crosshairs of climate change, which is one of the 4 crises as well. But before that, we even have an economic crisis with 10 million people out of a job, and we have to grow jobs now if people want to put food on the table, and we need to move forward. So we have these 4 crises, including climate change, which this president understood was alive and well, and we needed to address it. And he wasn't afraid to talk about these things and recognize that we have solutions that can actually address each of them if we're bold enough to take them on. And he developed a plan that was bold enough. He said, we're going to have a clean power sector by 2035. We're going to be net zero in 2050. We're going to attack this pandemic with everything we have because we can and we must. And he proved that when he passed the American Rescue Plan. That wasn't just about vaccinations or schools. It was about raising kids out of poverty, putting food on their table again. It was about giving everybody a sense that the United States can do this together. It was a wonderful moment to close the loophole on health benefits that were begging to be closed for years, so that everybody could feel more comfortable again that they were protected long term. And now we're moving to a recovery plan. And that recovery plan is going to be built on, guess what? A clean energy economy. because a clean energy economy can reconcile the fact that this president rightfully said 40% of our clean energy benefits and money is going to accrue to environmental justice communities, because we have to reconcile the challenge we have with racism, and we are going to invest in those communities so there's no community and no worker left behind, because we're going to understand that clean energy is winning, and we have to look at those communities that are heavily dependent on coal and other fossil fuel energy sources and recognize that they need a place in this future too. And we are going to invest in those communities and grow jobs. So it was such a no-brainer for me to come here and to start thinking through how we now move from rescue to recovery, how we look at investments and standard setting to all shift together and actually create that path forward that grows millions of jobs, that opens up opportunity for good paying union jobs, that actually invests in the kind of technologies and already available clean energy solutions that are going to bring a safer community to environmental justice communities. So that's what I'm doing. I'm working with the whole of government, and you know it because you've heard some of them. The cabinet is fabulous. Nobody can keep up with Jennifer Granholm. Nobody is smarter and more thoughtful than Pete Buttigieg. Nobody is more committed to EPA than Michael Regan is. We've got Deb Haaland, who is bringing a sea change to the way in which the Department of the Interior thinks about their lives. I've got Gina Raimondo. I've got Mayo Marty Walsh. We are cooking like crazy. And we're going to come out in the end of this with obligations that everybody needs to stand up and tout, including everyone on this call, because we are not going to neglect to call out the fact that there is financial risk to climate change, and we're going to take action on that as well. So I am so excited. I'm going to shut up now because my excitement is taking up all my time with Mindy, and I'm going to shut up and I'm going to thank her for all of her tremendous leadership. And I am going to tell you that this is the time of our lives, folks. If you want to actually transform tomorrow, today, you got to do it today. Thanks very much. Hey, Mindy.
Hey, Gina, I'm so sorry you don't have any enthusiasm left these days.
Yeah, I'm all tapped out.
That was great. And that's the perfect way to cap off what we've had. And I've got a few questions for you, but to bring you up to speed, for 3 days, we've had over 1,000 people, over 100 Fortune 500 companies, CEOs like Bill Ford and Bernard Looney of BP and Mark Schneider of Nestle, all speaking your language. We've had 300 or 400 investors who are part of our investor network that has 550 investors globally. We've had hundreds of NGOs, academics, regulators, and policymakers. And we're all here for the same reason, to do just what you said, Gina, to realize that it has to happen today, or it might not happen at all. And we need to come together, and we need to do what you all call Build Back Better. So you've got before you 500, 700, 800 folks still on the line, businesses, investors who literally employ tens and tens of millions of people who have access to capital. What do you want this community to do to make sure that we do build back better? Because every day I hear you, you've got a great plan, and then someone from somewhere calls and says, but the opposition is growing. So we want to build the support. Tell us where we could be helpful.
Well, you know, Mindy, what I'd like you to do is sort of the kind of framing that the president is bringing to the table. You know, the only fight that we're in is a fight for our future. I'm not fighting what used to be, and I'm not fighting people who, when they hear climate change, don't think jobs and economic growth and grabbing our future back and sucking back the supply chains that we've offshored. If they can't figure this out, then let's just keep moving forward and let's make our voices get heard, that if that climate change is a financial risk and we can have a future that is financially more stable and that brings every community along with us. And that's how we're gonna win. So this should not be a fight. The only fight should be who can grab those jobs first, who can invest in the things things that are going to make us more stable and more prosperous in the future, and who can invest in those first. So yes, you're going to hear me talk about traditional things like standard setting. You know, we're going to talk to the autos, we're going to talk to the utilities. When you're doing our nationally determined contribution, which I will owe very shortly, and will be doing before Secretary Kerry, my partner in crime, does his international leadership forum. When we talk, the utilities and the automakers are the big kahunas at the table in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, and they both have plans that are bold and exciting, and we have to invest in those. So yes, we'll do standard setting, but guess what? The standard setting is going to be complemented with the way in which we grow economically because of what we're asking them to do. It's going to be entirely consistent with the commitments from the large automakers that we've heard that by 2030, we might actually get to a ZEV fleet, not marginally, but all. Now, am I going to demand that? Wait and see. I'm not going that far out in the future and talking about what we're doing. But I do think we want to invest in manufacturing in the United States again. We want to make sure that the UAW sees this as an opportunity to grow jobs, not lose it. We want to grab battery manufacturing and do it in the United States of America. We want to recognize that we actually now have opportunities for lithium to be mined in the United States. How cool are these things? So there will be lots of naysayers that go back to the old framing. But all I really have to say is if I can get you guys behind us, talking about turning this in to the biggest economic opportunity of your lifetime, then we will win. But if you stand on the sidelines, then those voices will be the loudest heard, and we will never be able to provide the kind of leadership that people in the United States of America expect of their business leaders and their government.
Gina, we do want to transform tomorrow today, and you just said it all. Bill Ford said yesterday or the day before in an interview I did with him here at this conference that we are going to get to a point in early 2030 where there are no combustion engine vehicles coming off the assembly lines. So we've got an extraordinary course behind you, and we want to make sure that we follow it and we build it, and everybody in this room and all 550 of the global investors who have assets of $55 trillion are behind you in every way, shape, or form. And that's a
lot of money, Mindy. That's
a lot of zeros. I can't tell you how many zeros, but it is trillion with a T. It's a lot of money. And it is those $54 trillion in assets that are working with us on Climate Action 100 Plus, who are pushing the 100 largest emitters, who create 72% of the emissions, to bring those emissions down, to get much more consistent in their policy and lobbying, to disclose their emissions and their risk. So the investors are part of your engine. And I can't speak for all of them, but I am volunteering them to be with you on Building Back Better. It seems to me there are these two small things we're worrying about. Well, four, and you laid them out. That's equity and justice. And we have been talking about that for 3 days and realized we have only just begun. It's climate, it's COVID, but it's the economy. It is the future of our kids. So if we move forward and spend an infrastructure package of a couple $1 trillion here in the United States on the economy of the present, we lose economically and we lose on climate. If we move further together on Build Back Better and move resources into mass transit, into cleaner highways and cleaner steel and cleaner cement, and we make sure that we're building transportation in communities that need it, we can transform the economy and create jobs. And this community, those people listening, wanting to know how do we get behind you? What do you expect to happen with the Build Back Better campaign?
I really appreciate that. And I expect that we'll have more to say shortly. And we're going to be unveiling an NDC, and we'd like to have everybody standing with us. You know, we're going to be bold because we need to be bold, and because boldness will get the United States where it needs to go. We're not doing it for any reason other than it is going to move our country forward and keep our people protected. And you'll see that we're going to develop this in a way where there's lots of ways to get to the end zone. You know, we're not going to define it in a way that is static, in a way that doesn't allow everybody to succeed. And Mindy, one of the things I just wanted to highlight is one of the best things I like about this position that I'm in is there's no hiding anything. You know, we talk about the challenges out there. We're not expecting everything to be rosy and perfect, but we need everybody's help to make it as positive a momentum as we can. So I'd like to work with you, Mindy, because you're a trusted advisor and a good friend. And let's get people looking at what we're going to do and standing with us. Let's get them to sign on to being part of the energy and enthusiasm and hope we bring to the table. I just don't see any other alternative, and I don't see why we'd want to have a plan that was pigeonholing the answers instead of identifying the huge opportunities and how we're not just going to demand them, we're going to invest in them. Hello. This is about triggering the private sector to actually invest in the things that both of us want to invest in. So let's chat. Let's chat about how we do this on issues of financial risk. Let's chat about how we do this with the automakers. Let's chat about how we do it with the utilities who know where they're heading. The question is always to them, how quickly? But we'll figure that out and we'll get there together.
We will not only chat, Gina, we will march and we will act and we will bring resources. You know that in addition to traditional environmental policy and regulations, whether it's methane or the Clean Air Act or things that we've all been committed to for decades, Ceres for the last 10 years has been pushing the SEC to mandate the disclosure of climate risk and the Federal Reserve Bank to act on climate as a material financial risk. And yesterday we heard from one of the SEC commissioners, and we heard from Lael Brainerd, one of the governors of the Federal Reserve Bank, saying they're ready to act. They see the world differently. Beyond the normal environmental issues, we do believe that when companies consistently, in a mandatory way, at the SEC disclose climate risk, it helps them get on their journey to address it, because you can't act without knowing what your risk is. And you can't just look at risk as an environmental issue, but as an economic issue. Yeah. So we sent, and the administration's been great, Janet Yellen's office, everybody, we sent 50 recommendations on how to change the federal financial regulatory system. Hopeful? Are we on the way? What are you seeing?
Well, you're not shy. 50 is a good number. I think
I don't expect all 50 answers, one or two.
I have been, we talk about a great cabinet. Well, Secretary Yellen is very committed to this issue. And we just have some great spokespeople. You're not going to point to her and think she's just a huge risk taker. What's she thinking about? This is really going to be a groundbreaking opportunity, I think, for us to work together in two separate ways. One is that, the climate change issue has been raised as an issue that is essentially a risk issue. It's obviously a financial risk, but it's also being framed as a national risk and an international risk. And so you're right, we have to hit it head on. We have to find the answers to these questions. So I think if we can work together, and Secretary Yellen has been very clear that she's going to move on this issue, and you will see that happening again shortly. But also, if we do it in a way that provides an independent, way of ensuring that all of these results that people might tell us about, or ways in which you display your commitment in the financial arena, they have to be legit. They have to be done in a way that everyone can see and verify. And I'm not sure that it's going to end up being solely the government who looks at that issue, as opposed to making sure that there's an independent entity that everyone can trust. And so, I'd look to some direction from you, Mindy, and from all the folks on this call about how to make sure that as we're talking about this risk and identifying it and act on it, how do we make sure that a system is in place that doesn't allow some folks to sort of, I don't want to say greenwash, but that's sort of what it's calling. That's sort of what it's called. And it's not that I expect people are going to plan that way, but there should be a level of credibility, a system-wide approach to get this done. And I'm not necessarily thinking that's the role of government. I'm thinking maybe it isn't. Maybe there's a party that we could bring together to the table and help support that will provide that independence and that level of certainty to everybody.
Well, you're kind to say that. I'll say the following. Certainly with every company we're working with, it is about trust but verify. It is about setting goals, long-term, short-term, medium-term goals, and being very transparent about it. We've got to have equal playing field. And on disclosure, it may just be about government. And of course, there are a million things that could be done. But unless there's a level playing field where everybody's got to live by the same rules, not just the leaders on this call. And we do have hundreds of companies saying science-based targets, but we need thousands of companies. And, the other thing you've talked about, Gina, and I know we're getting towards the end, it's not only ambitious and audacity that we've got to, it's fairness and equity and justice. We've got to build back better in a way, and I know you have led the fight on this, in a way that cares for everybody and not just those of us in comfortable seats. So, I couldn't be more excited about what you're doing. I'm going to ask you to close as you're really thinking about how we move forward and how we do so in a way that you've talked about so eloquently, where everybody is a winner and not just some of us.
Well, we're doing that, Mindy, thank you. And again, thank you for your leadership. And thank you for all of the folks on the call, specifically the private sector companies and banks and asset managers. And, I do think, Mindy, you're right. People on this call want to do things right, and they want to be part of the solution. And I know that issues of equity can be very challenging, but in many ways they're very straightforward. They're about listening to communities and their needs and investing in those communities. And that's really what this is going to be about. Mindy, from your time in government that we're doing our best to make sure that we're keeping people healthy. That's what environmental rules are all about. We're supposed to protect people from pollution, but carbon's the same thing. It's a pollution. It's a pollutant, and we need to protect people long term. And so the president is really looking at this in two different ways. He's going to make sure where the money goes and where the benefits get accrued, so that the people that don't have good housing, that have poor transportation options, that don't have access to good food, that don't have access to health care, and no wonder why they're first and worst hurt. We have to deal with that issue, and we have to use investment to do it. And I think, secondly, we're going to have a White House Environmental Justice Advocacy Council that's starting up, and they're going to hold us accountable. We're going to look at this and make sure we're doing right by everybody. So I do think there is a future where we don't leave communities behind, and likewise, we don't leave workers behind, but we look at how we build a future that does indeed make it better for everybody. And essentially, that's what Build Back Better is about. And the thing that makes me feel like we're going to succeed is because of Ceres and everybody on this call, but also because Joe Biden is the fairest individual I have ever met in my life.
What a way to end. Gina, you're extraordinary. A great way to finish off our 3 days. We are optimistic. We're hopeful with your leadership. We are going to build back better, and we're going to transform tomorrow today. Thank you so much. We'll be in touch, and we're right there behind you.
Thanks, Mindy.